All right, welcome everybody to another Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity in order to join us during your lunch break. And we hope today that you guys are going to learn some great things that you can roll into your business. Today, we're super excited. We're joined by Amy Turck from the Gateway Region YMCA. Amy, thank you so much for taking the opportunity in order to join us today.
My pleasure.
And so, to kind of kick things off and jump into it, Amy, just to start off with a question that we ask a lot of our panelists who join us. Everybody has a different path in terms of how they've got into the world of fitness and wellness, and it's never really the same. I find it interesting how different it is from person to person. So just to kind of kick it off, how long have you been working within, the fitness at the Y? How did you first land into the world of fitness as a career?
Yeah, so it's interesting, the word fitness versus the consumer experience. I wouldn't say I am in the business of fitness. So I joined the Y as a member in Nashville, Tennessee, having lived away from my family. And it was really the only place that felt like home. And so I fell in love with the Y as a member. And when I moved back home, immediately decided that I wanted to participate at the Y as a member. And so in 2008, I had an opportunity to get involved in the member service side of the business and have been progressing ever since. So.
Awesome. I love the way that you put that as well, because I knew when I was reading my my question, like you've been working in the world of fitness, I was like, oh man, I definitely know that this isn't going to be the way in order to kind of underline and define how you look at the work just from the
Yeah.
conversations that we've had, and it's all about the customer experience as well. And I think coming from the Y space and serving the consumers, I'm sure there's so much that you see there within the organization, both now and in the past, as far as how things have changed. So, kind of with that being said, in your time in the industry, how has it changed from when you first started versus now?
Yeah, so I starting in 2008, I will be really honest with you. We've acquired a couple of independent facilities as well as have gone through a rather large merger, and so I'm now part of a YNAN YMCA. And what we recognized is, as folks are coming in to experience the Y, they're typically coming in to purchase that service. They might not know who we are, and like many of you all, they may not have understood who you are as a brand. But when they come in, they're typically that casual person. And as you move through that journey of a member, they become connected, they get involved in relationships. And then at the Y, we have this beautiful, partnership with community and ensuring that we're connecting our members back into the community. And so we do have folks that volunteer and donate throughout our organization. And that's our ultimate goal, is how do we become a community of advocates for our own community needs. And here in the Gateway Region Y, we know that we have quite a few needs. That casual, connected, and committed member are in very different stages of their journey. And so we do our best to meet them where they are when we can. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting and a great point to bring up as well. One of the things that I've learned from serving the Ys that we've worked with is that the member journey is a lot different from when you take a look at a typical typical fitness center and a Y. It's so much longer, and from working with somebody as a youth in youth sports, it's one of the
Mm-hmm.
one of the first times that I was exposed to the Y brand, and then again later in life, as you can go there in order to work out, and then additionally there's a donations component to it as well as
Mm-hmm.
a nonprofit. So there's a whole spectrum and a lifeline of that, and kind
Right.
of with the focus now and how you've seen kind of the industry changing in that as well. Where is kind of like the emphasis for the organization, either at your level or at that national level, that you see that it is changing and evolving?
Yeah. So what we recognize is, as we continue to see with the pandemic as well, social isolation well ahead of the pandemic has been, what we believe to be the next uh, community need that is going to be so pressing that we can't close our eyes to it anymore. And I think that's so tied to mental wellness. And so the Y is really taking that approach on community health and filling in the gaps where we know we need to. So as a nonprofit, that is our role. Our role isn't to come to the table with services that are available from other organizations within our communities. Our role is to show up and serve within the gaps. And right now, that's in all areas of swim safety, so swim outreach, getting into those schools with kiddos that might not have access to pools, but we know that their likelihood of drowning is much higher because they don't have that access. So teach land-based swim lessons, all the way to that teen component, where at the, in the United States, it seems as though civics and our government conversations, educating folks on our civic duty as a citizen has become a backseat to STEM-related activities in schools. So a lot of schools are closing their civics programs. So we're stepping in with youth and government programming. And then, that journey as an adult, you're coming in likely for personal training. Your doctor wrote you a script. You've got some arthritis, got to get into that pool. It could be a variety of things, or you just need that group exercise component to hold you accountable. We've got volunteers and donors that come in. We have folks coming in from corporate partners. We have probably about 18 different entry points on the member journey. So if that's helpful, answers that question.
Yeah, I always love jumping into like these discussions. Rebecca joined us in the last lunch and learn that we had, and I'm always so impressed with how your organization is helping across a variety of different points and connecting with the community, not just through fitness, but I mean, you just kind of went through a whole bunch of different points, and these are problems that are not just facing individual communities, but as like huge problems for the nation and the world at large. And social isolation, I think, is a big one. So yeah, I think that one is super interesting. As far as tackling that challenge. We'll jump into it in a little bit more detail, I'm sure, when we go to some of the present things, but I can already say like that piece is one that I think is super relevant for everybody who's on the call today, regardless of whether they're just serving through fitness or serving their community through other ways as well.
I think if we're talking about challenges and adversity, before we get into the probably the current situation, more focused on the pandemic in the future, I'd be curious to know, normally as humans, when we're facing challenges or adversity, it's actually an opportunity for growth. Yep. So what I'd actually be curious to know is, let's not think about now, but early on in your career, maybe there was a mistake or something that you had made that you learned a lot from. May have been painful, may have not been, but you learned a lot from it.
It did, yeah. Rather embarrassing. I'll tell the story. So when I had an opportunity, I was asked by our leadership to serve in a membership role, leading our consumer experience at a central level. And this was at a mid-level association. So prior to our merger with the YMCA of Greater St. Louis. And we have this amazing opener at one of our branches, and she knows every member by name. And one day I walked into the branch, I've noticed all these folks just gathering at the front desk, hanging out, chit-chatting it up. And there were a few members in front of me, and no one had acknowledged their name, because they can just walk right up and scan that card and walk right in. So no one said their name, no one said hello, they weren't greeted. And it just rubbed me in such a way that was so frustrating. I went ahead and took the scan gun holder off of the counter and handed it to their supervisor. And I was like, we've got to make them engaged. We can't sit here and just have a social hour. And so that was Friday morning. And on Monday morning, I had 37 members who knew that morning opener by name, beg and plead for her to have her scanning stand back, because she's also folding towels and ensuring safety in the building and all of these other things that she has to do to multitask. So clearly what impacts one shift in one branch is not going to be a consistent experience for every shift in every branch, let alone now 24 locations. So listening to the voice of that member was really incredibly important. And then also getting this buy-in of the staff to understand the WHY of why they should be engaging with members rather than forcing them to just say hello and break away from their personal conversation. So hopefully that that was I'm not kidding you, my biggest learning lesson, because if you do not have that frontline staff buy-in, they're not engaged with your members in a way that is representative of your brand. And they certainly aren't going to be that advocate for you. So that was very early on in my career and unbelievably embarrassing.
No, that's excellent though, because obviously just hearing you talk about it, I can hear the passion, and I can tell that you still think about that on occasion. Is it safe to assume those processes now are basically ingrained into the culture now? So you built some kind of sustainable process now.
I think it's something that we have to remind ourselves that it's continuous improvement. We cannot assume that once we've taught or explained the benefits of the consumer experience being a centric focus of the consumer and the staff, we can't assume that everyone grasps that. We have to continue to reiterate that and make sure that it is woven into the culture. And so that's where the heavy lifting is. How can we maintain that? And so often it's that train and retrain. So yeah.
Excellent. And I think another opportunity for growth for everyone is basically who you surround yourself with. And I know there's been a lot of important people in like my career, et cetera. And I'm sure you've had plenty of people who have made a strong impact in your career. Would you say that from those memorable relationships, there's a best advice that you had received, or maybe a top two, if you can't narrow it down to one?
Yeah, I walked in on this first day in the central office, and the CEO comes in and says, I've had one other conversation with a man, so it's a little intimidating. And he sits down and out of nowhere, uninvited, and just looks right in the eye and says, if you cannot influence these people, you will not be successful. So figure that out. It was just first day, not even an hour in on the job, and quickly started to sweat a little. And but that has stuck with me, and it's really identifying what does influence mean, and reminding ourselves that bringing others along in that conversation is so critical. And so that's the one that stuck out with me. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And then taking it on the from another point of view, Amy, obviously you're on here because you're very influential within your organization. You're well respected in the industry, et cetera. So I have to assume, and I'm almost 100% certain that people have come to you for advice as well in the past, Amy. What's kind of like some big advice that you've given to others, whether they were coworkers or simply people in your network?
Yeah, I think if we take the lens, so often my role is to support when there are recovery options with members. And so it's really take that member feedback for what it is. It's very valid to them, and they're valid in the way they feel and how they'd like their experience to be. And so try not to take it personally, but how do you learn from it and just continue to focus on that continuous improvement process that allows for you to make way for innovation that might need to exist when you least expect it. And often when members come to the door, and I get the roughest ones, right? So the ones that just aren't going to be happy no matter what is happening within the branch. They will want to talk to me at the end of the day after they've talked to 2 or 3 other people, and they're not getting the answer that they want. And so it really is about just slowing down to listen and ensuring you're not taking it personal. Remove all of those emotions, and you're showing up to serve that member where they are, and that's the most important thing at that time. And then reflect and work on an improvement process once the conversation's over. So continuous improvement. Open those ears and listen. Yeah.
That's
it.
it. Yeah, and I was just gonna say, it seems like a lot of the themes that you're talking about are quite consistent with one another, about basically identifying the problem and then taking small steps, at least to start, in the right direction, and you'll eventually get there. So I think that's a bit of optimistic news for everyone, and I 100% agree with that, Amy. And I know you and Kaylin have known each other for a while. We've only known each other recently, but I can tell you're a bit modest. But I need to know, what do you consider your biggest accomplishment?
Did you happen to have a chance in order to see the results of the poll, Derek?
Sure
So
did. So
go ahead.
yeah, so basically, we had sent a poll out to you guys asking where you guys stand, and I guess the reason behind this is when Amy's given her recommendations, etc., she wants to take into consideration where you guys are at as far as opening. So, have you always been closed since the quarantine? Have you opened back up? Have you had to reclose since opening? And what I've seen from the poll is essentially 2/3 have closed again after reopening.
Oh
So
wow.
basically, 2/3 of the audience members are part of organization who had opened up and then reclosed. So I found that to be a bit higher than what I was expecting, at least on my end, Kaylin.
Yeah, the same from my end as well. I mean, when I was looking at the map that was provided by the New York Times, the reversals of openings was the minority of the states that were there. So we're either attracting a lot of people from California, New York, Illinois, and those regions on the webinar today, or yeah, or something else. But I do find that particularly interesting. Uh,
Hmm.
in the conversations that we've had with Amy and her team, they've been doing some incredible things in order to be able to engage with their members. So, in from the first wave when COVID originally hit, and so if you guys remember and were participating in the webinars when we were actually presenting this using slides, this the thing that we presented is that this is going to affect members in following a certain phase that will happen, and the phases need to be addressed accordingly. And one of the main things that we needed to be done is going beyond fitness and actually engaging with the community on a personalized level. So that was one of the things that we've discussed as far as what should be done by the organization. And some of the things that happened is many of you, including Amy's team as well, started offering not just virtual digital classes, but you started offering things like virtual coffee times. That was one of the most popular times that we've seen within our other organizations, where during that moment you guys would host a time during the day where the members were able to get together and still have that community feel, so that this way that you can keep them from being socially isolated, because that was one of the important value adds that you're able to offer to them. It's not just fitness that you're offering to them. You're offering connectivity to the staff members that you have. You're offering them connectivity to friends who they meet in the organization. And so this is helping to combat that social isolation and social connectivity that people are really striving to achieve.
You know, I think to add on to that, Kaylin, as we're waiting for Amy to come back in, it comes back to the last few guests we've had on our podcast have kind of all said a similar thing in the fact that, stop using the word social distancing, where you may be physically distancing, but social distancing is one of the last things we should do on the face of the earth. We should avoid it at all costs. So these ideas like these coffee chats, this offers like an opportunity for individuals to interact with each other, which is obviously motivating for them, because even people that are going into like a fitness center, even if they're not going in with someone else, having a training partner, etc., they still, such a huge part of that experience is saying hello to the people at the front desks, or seeing familiar surroundings, the people they see every day. So it definitely goes a long way towards engaging those members while the 2/3 of you have been closed again. So maybe just a quick question I would ask the audience too while we continue to go is, have you guys and your organizations done any kind of interesting social connectedness events that have been very, I guess, have worked well for you that you'd be willing to share? If so, please go ahead and throw it in the chat. We'd be interested to hear about it.
Awesome. And while we're waiting on some of those replies in order to come through, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly, just to kind of piggyback on the conversation. but make sure that we're elaborating on it as well. So I am sharing my screen now. It should be jumping up on your guys' end as well. Just let me know, Derek, when you have it on your side.
Not yet. It's thinking.
Yeah,
I'm good.
sometimes it takes a little bit in order to be recognized. Awesome.
You're good, Kevin.
Yep. So what we're showing here is when we originally went into this crazy world that we are just used to kind of being in now, called COVID. We broke it up into really 4 different phases, and those phases started with confusion. This was that phase when we were going into it and everyone was saying, "Oh my God, I need to get toilet paper," and there was a big rush there. That's kind of the way that we've summarized this particular phase. And we look back on it and we think it was kind of a joke, but it now is continuing on. The second phase, which we all know well, is there was an accept and adapting phase, where we realized at some point this is the new reality in terms of how things are going to look. Many the organizations that we've spoken to who realized this quickest and started to create their plans and move into the preparing phase faster were much better responsive to this. So we had organizations where within a week of closing, I'm sorry, not of closing, but within a week of hearing about COVID and the measures, they went on the offensive. So they started communicating with their members. They created ways that they were able to engage with them digitally, and they spoke to them about how they wanted to engage with the brand going forward, whether they wanted to do some kind of online work or not. Those companies that were on the offensive were the ones that we've seen from our customer base, who were the ones that fared better. Whereas if you compare it, there was a group of people who were a little bit in denial, thinking that COVID is going to be something that's just going to blow by. And now we can see this, that months and months later, that this wasn't something that was blowing by. But one of the pieces that we got wrong when doing this is that it's not just we're not going right into ramping again. We thought we were hopeful to go right into ramping, but now what's going on is we're going back into another area where we're having a reversal of opening, and that reversal of opening is going to create a different type of expectation from the customer as well. So with that being said, we don't know how it's going to go on in this particular area. We did know that this could potentially have problems such as an impact on businesses, impact on the economy, and that was only considering one straight kind of line theory. Now that we're going into another reversal, this is going to kind of pose the question for the industry to kind of see how are we going to be able to recover from this and move forward. Is this going to make the possibility for the industry in fitness even greater? Are we going to see more economic hardship during this time, or have a lot of organizations figured out that their brands are able to also be consistent and engaging with their members through the digital technologies that they're using? Because many people are doing that in the moment, and from our end, we're hopeful to see if these are going to be enough for the members in order to be able to engage with the brands. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now and come back here.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm not really sure what happened. Internet went completely down and the branch.
No problem at all. Happy to have you back, and yeah, and so kind of jumping back into it. Before you left, one of the things that Derek did is he took a look at the results of the poll, and the interesting thing is that he saw that there was 2/3 of the responses where those the people who are with us today, they're in a reversal of reopening. So 2/3 of the attendees have gone through a reversal. So kind of with that being being said, if we were to look at your organization, I know you also have some organizations that have gone through the reversal of opening. Um, with that kind of happening in the moment, how has the team been responding to the reversals of the openings now, and how is it different from when we first went into the closings when we first were hit by COVID?
Yeah, so locally, we have not had to close our facilities due to COVID. We have had to go backwards in services we have opened up and offered, and or capacity, but with a fantastic partnership. And I honestly think that, I'm thankful that we are the wise of our brand recognition and our partnership within our communities, but our partnership has actually grown stronger with the city of St. Louis as an organization, and the government entities within each of the counties. So we cross 2 states and 13 counties we serve. Everyone wants to have their own rules. So managing that is very interesting. But then also hearing from my peers across the country, there's a really solid playbook we have in place on how we have to work our way back from offering resources. And so what we have done is really engaged in the booking features through VirtuaGym, because we have seniors we know need that engagement. And again, going back to that conversation around social isolation, which is more detrimental. So we are following and adhering to guidelines to ensure that we can stay open. And it is unbelievably, just a level of accountability has to be in place in order for this to work. And so I'm unbelievably proud of our association and the way that we've shown up to do that. So we have not had to completely close, I don't want to say this out loud, knock on wood, we have not had to close our doors because of that spike. Now, noticing that we are seeing another increase in the Midwest in cases, I can imagine we're going to be on pins and needles for a while, especially through the holidays, because what they are identifying is those family gatherings are typically the spreaders, it seems to be. So we're trying to navigate that not only within our fitness facilities, but we're also offering hybrid school options in partnership with the local school district. So yeah, it's everyone's pivoting, and grace is the name of the game these days. Everybody's give us grace.
Yeah, and with that being said, is there a different tactic then that you would put in place for if you were to go through that again, or would you go back to the same playbook that you guys have had originally, where you would take the same measures in order to be able to engage? Or was there some lessons that you've learned from the first round of closings that you wouldn't want to necessarily make that mistake going into it again?
Yeah, I think that as the why, again, going back to that federated model, we really need to figure out how to identify and partner with one another to really be able to serve our members to the best of our ability. And I think that we were behind the curve on that. I think many organizations and for-profits have identified how best to do that ahead of COVID. I think at the why, there was almost a level of fear as to whether or not that would be a valuable virtual membership, or even a virtual tool would be a valuable resource, as we want that engagement within our facilities. And so I think that there's some learnings there. I wish we would have been ahead of it well before COVID, and not in fear of where the market has been going for some time. It also is a dancing game for us, because what part of that might be challenging to our 501c3 charitable status. So there's a little bit of a push and pull on how we serve our members in a virtual environment. I would say that I would do it all over again, because I think that those that are with us at the Y are here for that reason and for that in-person community. And if they can't get here, they want to see their instructors. They want to see those faces they recognize. And so by being able to offer those virtual platforms that we've been able to do in those classes that are local, we've been able to stay connected and engaged with those folks, primarily our seniors. Others that are well-versed in the the fitness industry, they're good with the crafted workouts or even working with their personal trainer virtually. So I'm very confident on where we are now in our pathway. I think it took us a little too long during the pandemic to get here. So I think we're well. If we have to do this again, I think we're well poised to do this again without fear of folks completely shifting away from not paying any membership dues, but being willing to pay us something for their virtual experience and us staying connected with them through that time.
Yeah, I think that's super, super interesting. And I would say that it wasn't just, your organization, it was in a spot. We saw that across our sales team as well. And so typically within conversations pre-COVID, most of the people who would come to us were on the offensive when it came to their technology strategy. So they had the idea that they wanted to strategically position their business in the virtual space so that this way they can get ahead of what they saw as a curve. And Apple coming into the space and other organizations like Peloton going directly for the consumer is a great example of how we have shifting need from a consumer perspective.
Correct.
But during COVID, in March and April, we also saw the other side as well, where there was a defensive type of play as well, where it was more fear-based, and so there was a lot of reservations that were had as well by others, even, but they knew deep down, like, I'm scared to do this, but I have to do this in order to be able to have something that my members can do within the organization. And sure, a lot of their minds have completely changed now, and they're seeing the offensive side, the offensive play as well, because our members have been enjoying it. With that kind of happening, how have you think that COVID and also like the potential of reversal has caused you to rethink your member engagement strategy then?
We have we've known for quite some time we have to meet our members where they are. And right now they're on their mobile devices. And so whatever we can do to identify a way in which we can connect with them there and ensure that our frontline staff who have those relationships one-on-one with those members are enabled and empowered to facilitate those relationships virtually, I think that's where we're heading. I think that's where we're going. We have to ensure that our staff team understand who we are as an organization, but and trust that they're here because of those same values, and empowering and enabling them to serve that member one-on-one rather than in the mass. Rather than in the masses. Small groups we know are unbelievably critical to engagement and well-being within the human psyche. But we also know that that service component is critical, and so we have to be able to provide that where they are. And I think that's the direction we're going to continue to go.
Yeah, Kaylin, if I may jump in there just real quick, I'm curious. Obviously, we know about the impact you guys have in the community. It all starts with internally, as you had mentioned, with basically the employees. And while we talk a lot about how this impacts members, clearly it impacts employees as well. So, how do you keep them motivated? I mean, maybe how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep them motivated so that they can deliver this experience and the strategy and execute it to the members?
Yeah, so I have to back up a little bit and talk about our approach when we chose Virtua Gym as a solution, because I think that gives us a little bit of an edge that I wasn't familiar that any other platform offered. So we chose Virtua Gym as a solution for our mobile engagement strategy back in the summer of 2019, and we were up and running as of December of 2019. And so our ramp up into this virtual environment was rather quick, led by the genius Becky Schubert. And our efforts were all about making small communities on the mobile app. And so as we've gotten into COVID, we have identified ways in which we engage our staff through the mobile app as users in a small community. Because if we don't have them using the app, they have no way of talking to our consumer, our members, our participants on how they should use the app, how to troubleshoot through the app. And so it is all about even meeting our staff where they are And so the Virtual Gym platform has provided us that opportunity to engage our staff in small communities in that way, being flexible with their schedules, being flexible with whether or not they're comfortable coming back, their own consumer confidence, addressing any fears they may have. But ensuring that we are offering that same level of engagement of to staff that we are of members, that we care about them and who they are. And I think honestly, I've pivoted my focus there so much because I realized that they emulate what we emulate as leaders. And so if we're not positive and energetic and ready to serve our members or leading by example, then they won't either. So our leadership has taken an oath to serve frontline 25% of their time. So if they work a 40-hour work week, they're at the front 10%, or 10 hours a week, whether that's swimming lessons or teaching a class or working at the Welcome Center or in the fitness center. They're hands-on with the members. And then we're sharing out those member success stories and how thankful they are that we're here because we're the only people they see in a day. And we're the only real human interaction they're getting. And that right there, it tells me that if it's one life that we're transforming in that day, then that's something to celebrate. And we did our jobs and everybody needs to rest well at night. So I think we're just going to hone in on that and focus on that story of that transformational journey of that member that needs us here.
Yeah, 100%. That's super interesting, and maybe we can dive into that in a bit more detail, especially as many other organizations are going through a reversal of opening. If you haven't taken the time in order to think about how you're going to engage with your members when they're not able to come into your facility during the first round, don't make the same mistake. Come up with that member engagement strategy for when they're not able to come in now. So with that kind of being said, can you walk us through a bit what you guys ended up creating as far as your strategy to engage with the members, via the app and the other services that you were offering?
Yep. So we actually recognize that, COVID or no COVID, we really should be doing these things no matter. So when a member is missing in action or MIA, what are we doing to reach out just to check on them and see if they're okay? Have they not checked in a couple of days or a couple of weeks? And that's got to be woven into the fabric of that journey and that experience, because they don't want to be just a number. This is where they come for their well-being journey. And so we have to ensure they understand we care about them. And so making those phone calls, trying to engage with them in that virtual manner, doing coffee talks, we did outdoor pickleball. So our parking lots were empty. So we had outdoor pickleball set up, and then we had some learning opportunities on how to navigate through the app to access those virtual resources. And we did those outside, socially distanced, and that was really nice. That was all during our closing. And so when we reopened, we've held on to some of that. And I think, those coffee talks and continuing with those virtual classes with those instructors they know and love has just been unbelievably impactful.
Nice. And then a question that came through, I'll ask it broadly and then I'll ask a specific question that came in. Are you finding that certain demographics are more likely in order to engage with the strategy than others, or are you finding different ways in order to engage with different age demographics and that?
Yeah, so I will say that we are not seeing families right now. We know that kids are doing some sort of a hybrid model of education. Both parents are either working in the home. If there's two parents in the home, they're trying to figure out how to navigate working in the home and childcare. So we're just not seeing them. And what used to be any sort of normal of a 4 o'clock group exercise class and parents dropping kids off and child watch just isn't there right now. We are seeing young males engaging. We're seeing the single male engage. And then we're also seeing seniors. I am telling you, those that are living alone are likely, or kids have aged out of the home, are more likely to come into the facility. We have been able to engage, and again, I'm in a different space than some others, but we have been able to engage in our swim team efforts now, and we can do that socially distanced. And so There are some of those small groups we can pick up on, but we do have some folks that are so loyal to these group exercise classes that if they are engaged, then they will either engage virtually online with us and or in person. So that's something that we have noticed as well. If they recognize an instructor, they're going to participate. We are looking at some ways to engage families and fill that void of the certain gaps right now that exist. You know, how do we maybe serve as a Wi-Fi rental station for members, or a member benefit for them to drop off and child watch for 2 hours while they have a socially distanced space in our facility to use Wi-Fi just for 2 hours, if nothing else. So we are learning on how to do that in person. That's where most of my focus has started to shift.
Yeah, super interesting. Tracy was the one who kind of inspired me for the question. In specific, she asked a question about youth groups. So in her meetings with other local organizations who service youth, the consensus seems to be that youth in particular are less and less interested in anything that might be offered by her association virtually, given that they are already spending a bunch of time online in their for their school day. Are you personally finding this to be an issue, and any thoughts on how to combat the problem when programming?
We are also seeing that and recognizing that it's hard to engage with youth over the age of 8 at this point for us as an organization anyway, because of their tug and pull with technology or in general. And so I don't have a solution for that. I know that we have been having a lot of conversations on how do we get better at partnering with the schools to provide whatever might be missing. Right now we're partnering to do driver's education for those that are in 15, 16 years of age that would typically get driver's education through the public school system. And so how can we help partner with that through multiple organizations? So as an entity that's coming to the table to serve youth, it's critical to build the partnerships. Don't try and come at it and solve the problem alone. You've got to plug in where folks already have a need. And I think that's where our biggest learning lesson, especially here in my local community where I live, is. And we've already seen some uptick in ideas that we never would have been involved in before. I mean, driver's education, I would never thought the YMCA would have been involved in that. The other thing that we have been embracing is trauma awareness for teenagers. And so these teenagers that are starting to feel depressed because they are not engaged socially, and how are we showing up to ensure that we're serving them? There are some, and I'm not at all an expert in this, but trauma awareness training has really picked up within our association to just educate individuals on a way in which we can better serve our teens that have had some sort of a post-traumatic stress type of situation, and where we are. So mental health has kind of really been how do we serve in that bucket? Ask your members what is the gap? Where do they want us to serve? And that's honestly humbly where we are right now.
Yeah, super interesting, and maybe we can kind of take the conversation to predictions into the future, and how we think that this situation and circumstances are going to evolve. So, where do you think that the industry, taking into consideration the reversals of opening and just in general, is going to be going from here? And what opportunities do you think that others should be paying attention to? Whether and it can be any trends, like kind of what we're talking about now, social isolation, economic trends. Where do you think that the big opportunities are going to lie for organizations?
I think that, oddly enough, personal training and private swimming lessons has been where I know we have an opportunity, because parents know they want it for their kiddos, or people know they want that. They want to stay on track, but they don't have maybe the self-motivation. That behavior change is just a barrier they cannot seem to get through without that accountability person. And so we are seeing a need for that one-on-one type of approach. And I think that is something that we should embrace and figure out how to empower our staff to sell that without them feeling like it's not a natural way for them. The why we hire a lot of very nice and amazing humans. They don't have that sales niche, within them in general. Not saying everyone, but it's okay to serve in that place, and how we educate them on that. So I think that's our biggest opportunity as we try and identify where we can maintain that revenue generation. Where we should be showing up is really getting connected with those change makers in the community, and how do we serve. We know that that's our role, and even as health and wellness professionals, what are we doing to combat community health concerns across the country? Youth obesity is such a scary topic for me, and now the mental health. It is a those are the two areas that I would really encourage folks to lean in and listen and learn more.
Yeah, definitely some good
Yeah.
points there. Yeah, and so this might be a little bit of a kind of like a curveball for a question, but I also know that a lot of organizations who join our webinars don't necessarily have the same resources and connection to community leaders as a Y. Is there any, and these are big problems as well that you're bringing up, isolation and childhood obesity, and is there any tips that you would provide for somebody who's maybe an independent business owner to try and to be able to serve their community in some of these areas that are maybe tough without the same resources?
Yeah, and I would say join your local boards, whether that's the Y as a partner. I'm okay with a for-profit independent organization being a part of my board, because we're trying to solve the same problem, right? We're trying to serve the community, and I'm not going to shy away from that. But get involved in your Rotary. Rotary, I know that sounds so crazy, but I'm on that line of Gen X or millennial, right? And they generalize us as the non-membership generation. Join those Rotaries and chambers and get connected, because that is that personal, no different than your own business, that personal connection. You're building your own brand personally, and they have to trust who you are in order to engage in your business. And so get to their tables and show up in a way that you bring something new or can plug in that gap. And I think that's, with the Y brand or not, that's who I am as a person. How do you show up to just fill in that gap in the community? And I think that's what drew me to the Y in the first place. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Get involved in Rotary and chambers, local school district if possible.
100%. Yeah, I think that's great, and maybe a follow up to that one then, just to help others as well is, what would you recommend as kind of best resources to help others in order to be able to build their knowledge and in order to be able to help do these types of initiatives or others? Is there, and it can be anything: blogs, webinars, books, courses, networks, etc.
Yeah, I have a lot of books. Anything Starbucks related, obviously, I would gravitate towards immediately and read. But Club Industry does a really good job of engaging their audience and providing content. I've been unbelievably impressed, and I'm not paid to say this, but I've been unbelievably impressed with Virtuogen studies and the resources that they've provided. And I think your software providers that are with you on this journey are trying to be your partner in this. And so identify them as your resource and help them, ask them for that help and that partnership, review their articles. And I think that's where the majority of the most up-to-date trends are coming from for me. I do like Harvard Business Review as well, Stanford Social SSIR, Stanford Social Innovation Review. I think I might be having that wrong, but subscribe to it and read it weekly. And Forbes, and they've got a pulse on what's happening daily, but also providing you with those trends.
Yeah, there's definitely some good resources in there. I look at them myself, and I think it's super important to make sure that individuals are up to date on these things as well. I know others, including myself, I'll be overwhelmed with what's happening in the business on a day-to-day, but it's really important to make sure that you take some time in order to set aside so that this way you can think about how to work on the business and improve, whether it's the business overall or the department overall or the member experience, whatever it may be, rather than continuing to force yourself to be just dealing in the process
Mhm.
itself. Looking towards other areas is what's going to give you those creative ideas in order to try and do new things. But also, when you're scanning these different trends, you'll see trends that maybe are fads. I think that's kind of like a term that we have within the industry. Is like, oh no, that's just going to be a fad for the moment. Based off of what you're seeing, Amy, is there anything that you see that's kind of being talked about a lot, or maybe getting like you're hearing a buzzword come up a bit more often that is an overrated trend or a common problem that you see happening in the industry, and would advise others to potentially avoid the pitfall there?
After being through this conversation, I feel like I need to think through that one. I was a little more prepared at the beginning of this on this one. I do think that folks will come back to the facility. I don't think it's going to be the acquisition process that we once needed it to be. I think it's going to be a focus on that one member and retaining that one member and that experience they're having with us. And I think that we're going to have to pivot to focus on that retention and engagement strategy and allow them to be our advocates when the time is right. Because I think consumer confidence is going to sway in various ways as as various parts of our country reopen. Um, yeah, yeah. They're coming. They're going to come back, but they're going to look for their mom groups on Facebook to tell you who they should go to. So make sure you know who those people are in those groups advocating for you, and get them engaged or involved as members.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I feel, uh, at least the way that I'm inferring it, and coming from like the lens of technology, I've always felt that as a company, our best it's been best for us to work with partners like you and other organizations where you're able to make a one-to-one connection with the member, and oftentimes technology makes it the solution that many technology providers is they think in scale. And so, like, if you look at Peloton, for instance, they try to make those community pieces within there, but at the end of the day, you're by yourself. You're in your own room, and you don't
Yeah.
have that personal connection to the trainer and to the people who are there. So, as I was hearing you speak, and talking about one-on-one, I feel like maybe that's kind of like a huge overrated trend that I see some organizations trying to strive towards is, oh, I need to do this at scale, and in the process of doing that, they're neglecting the individual member and the
Right.
connectivity to the individual member.
Right. Yep. The other area that I would tell you want to pay attention to is that aging population. Folks that are not as tech savvy or they're not as socially connected anymore. So once those families are socially connected in a way where they might have these just little pods, and they're just gonna stay within these pods for a while during this pandemic, or through end of school year or next year or whatever. And so we think that June's really going to be kind of a bust out month for us next year once we've kind of gotten through that full year of chaos. And we're going to see, we are going to see an influx of individuals. Now, from my perspective, I'm seeing them from the 19 different ways they come into us as a member rather than just coming in as a fitness member. So when you're talking about how you're showing up for your community, you've got to differentiate and figure out who you are as an individual business owner For those that are independent fitness centers, you are really going to have to differentiate in who you are and how you show up for that community, and again, creating that experience for those members. I think that senior population is one of the populations that folks need to pay attention to. They're going to be the ones that will spend money on that personal training. They do want to be connected. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. I've heard it in different ways, from personal trainers who are thinking about specializing within that particular area. But it's great to hear, an organization like yours who is already connecting with members in not just fitness, but in working with the community in other ways, finding the connection that this demographic is a great link into fitness and a perfect customer of personal training.
Yeah.
A good tip for others in there who haven't built their businesses around it. I feel like many of the studios that we've spoken with think about their branding and their niche towards more like the 27 to 29-year-old females, and that's how they build the brand. So that's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Awesome. And with that kind of being said, I wanna say we have like 3 minutes left. I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at the audience questions that have come through as well, so that we can go ahead and maybe address a couple of those. Derek, did you see any come through?
The ones that came through live, we've already taken care of. There were some previous ones that we basically had covered along the way, but it could be interesting to note. I think it's kind of where we were having the connectivity issues is when we're talking about different kind of ways to engage at this time. One of the questions from the crowd is basically, what are the different kinds of workshops? So I think maybe if you could elaborate on the outside the box ideas. For instance, yeah, I'm completely surprised by the idea you had mentioned about learning how to drive with the local school. Are there other kind of workshops for other different demographics, etc., that you've seen to be successful, whether at your association or hearing from others?
Yeah, and I'm not a driving teacher, FYI. You don't want me to do that. So our senior market, we are, getting into that space where we would like to engage our teens to teach our seniors how to use technology. And so how do we bridge that gap of generations for that mutual respect of one another, as well as forging relationships. I think that's something that's going to be critical, because even the insurance company is going primarily electronic. And I think of my grandmother and how unbelievably unprepared she is. So she doesn't even have Wi-Fi at her home. So how do we how do we reach that market? How do we engage with those individuals? And so another thing that we have the opportunity to do, again, those types of workshops is think about that 0-hour PE. So a lot of schools have cut PE, again, going back to that civics, and if it's not STEM related or STEAM related, then they're just not getting it. And so we know that ADD and ADHD is tied to lack of activity. And there's studies out there that show that if children exercise an hour before they take a test, they're likely to score higher on the test because they're not so fidgety and such. So a couple of key things that we're going to try and get involved in here in my local community is healthy eating and physical activity, getting involved in food resource grants within the community, and ensuring that kiddos have access to healthy food even on the weekends. We're seeing that gap. But then the other side of that is, how do we do PE before the school day starts? Because if they're not offering PE at the school, can we provide that in a space that allows for them to get that physical activity so that they aren't then being medicated for having energy in a school social setting? So it's just those are long-term trends pre-COVID, but I think for post-COVID it's going to be even a greater concern. So those are some things that we're going to be working through. I hope that answers your question. Yeah,
absolutely. And well, technically I lied. It wasn't my question, but yes, it did answer the question. I'm just looking. There is there is one. It's a bit open-ended. I'm not expecting you to answer this at all. We are already a minute over, and this sounds like a couple hour-long answer, but can you give a step-by-step on basically how to execute this? So one of the things you had mentioned before is just, networking is a big part. YMCA associations are willing to help each other out, etc. So I'm not expecting to answer that now, but is there a way that if someone was interested in contacting you, whether it be LinkedIn or email, that they could reach out?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. They're certainly welcome to reach out via LinkedIn. My email is certainly available if you'd like. If for those of you in the Y industry, I am a moderator for the membership team on the national level, so feel free to reach out there so that we can aggregate that conversation if you'd like. But yeah, happy to.
Excellent. Then, Kaylin, that was it from the audience. They kept it easy on us with just a few questions this week.
Awesome. Well, in that case, I want to say, no problem at all. But I want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us today for another Lunch and Learn. Amy, thank you especially for taking the time in order to share your wisdom with us and everybody who joined us today. It was great.
We appreciate y'all. We appreciate your partnership and helping us make this easier and being just evolving with us every time we have a question or recommendation. So thank you guys very much. My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Pleasure speaking with you today, Amy.
Have a great day, everybody.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.